do it. Right, we're recording. Let's do it. You ready to go?
Yep.
Wonderful stuff. Right, I think a good place to start, given the fact of what you told me just before we started this, what is your career? What do you do?
So my day job is I work in technology for a sight loss charity, but on the side I do comedy, I do music, and I'm also a life coach. So I don't sleep much.
You don't sleep at all by the
I
sounds
do a
of
lot
it.
of stuff.
So talk to me about how you got into life coaching.
It's something I had an interest in. Most, if not all, good therapists will tell you that they had their own struggles, and I certainly did as a teenager. I went through a period of depression, a bit of anxiety, and a lot of stuff. It's not easy growing up as a kid with sight loss like I do. So yeah, lots of stuff attached to that, and I started learning about ways to help myself. So I learned about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and hypnosis, and learned how to help myself, and then really wanted to help other people as well.
So it seems as though you've really turned what was initially a setback or something to overcome into a push forward to help other people.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, been through my own struggles, learned how to get myself out of them, and I think life does that. Life is a journey, and I've learned some really powerful techniques and some things that just not enough people know about or have an understanding of, and that's given me a real passion to try and help other people and to tell other people about the things that I've learned myself.
You're going to have to spill the beans on that one. I want to know what these magic techniques are.
I can't give them all away.
You can give us one for the channel.
I absolutely can. Okay, one of my favourite tips is, are you familiar with the concept of the conscious and the unconscious mind?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've got our conscious mind, which is doing all the thinking, and the unconscious, which is controlling all the things we're not consciously thinking about. And the unconscious mind really wants to help us. It's there for us, not against us, but it's not the most intelligent. It's not as intelligent as we are consciously, and it doesn't understand a negative. So it's really important for us to be thinking about what we do want and not what we don't want. And so many people will come to a coach like me and they'll be like, don't want to feel anxious anymore. And the problem with that is that your unconscious mind doesn't hear the don't. All it hears is what you're focusing on. So I can prove this to you really easily by saying, don't picture a purple elephant. And you can't not. You're picturing it now, right?
In my mind.
Yeah, because your unconscious mind just can't hear the don't. So this is why we really need to focus on what we want and not what we don't want. So that's one of my favourite top tips.
That's very interesting, actually. I hadn't realised that. I know from my own research that the unconscious mind is very basic or primitive in its ways. Of sort of, for instance, it can't distinguish the difference between, if you take a drug, it cannot understand the harm of the wonder, so to speak. It doesn't look and go, well, that was amazing last night, but let's just leave that today because we can't do it 2 days in a row. It goes, fuck me, that was wonderful, let's go again.
Absolutely.
It doesn't understand that as you say, the limitations of.
Apparently it has the rough intelligence of sort of a 5-year-old child.
Wow,
in terms of the reasoning. So you're bang on.
So next time anyone says I'm a real brainiac, say no. By very nature, you are a 5-year-old.
Well, you might be a brainiac, but your unconscious isn't.
That one's lacking behind.
Yeah, definitely.
So where did you get into life coaching? Did you go from comedy into life coaching, or vice versa?
No, I've been coaching far longer than I've been doing comedy. So I did my coaching training, my coaching in my NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. God, when was that? 2017, roughly. That was when I did my master practitioner, and that's when I learned all the NLP and hypnosis. So I've been coaching, but being a bad coach in a way by not taking the leap and still having a day job. Slightly hypocritical coach there. I do as much of it as I can, and I am trying to build more.
What's held you back on that point?
Oh, definitely my own thinking, which is hence why I'm a hypocritical coach.
The unconscious mind is holding you.
my own self-doubt, and just, having bills to pay, and not being able to make that leap into freelance without some stuff ready to go.
So where does comedy come into the question in this then? Is that something that you're intending to sort of push beyond all of it, or is it also a remaining hobby?
I started doing comedy just for fun. So I joined a course with a friend at the beginning of 2020. We were about 4 or 5 weeks into an 8-week course when 2020 March lockdown hit. So I never got to finish the course. But people have just been telling me for years that I need to do comedy because I always say when you can't see or when you've got any kind of disability, it's a phenomenal lesson in the concept of if you don't laugh, you'll cry, because stuff goes wrong, or people react in funny ways. So kind of my life just writes its own comedy. So I've been writing things down for years. Finally, 2023, I joined another course and got to complete it this time and did the graduation gig where you do your 5 to 7 minutes in front of a crowd. And it went really well. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'm actually all right at this. And I've been saying for the last year and a half, if people stop laughing, I'll stop doing it. Or if I stop enjoying it, I'll stop doing it. But people are still laughing. And yeah, last month I won the Brighton Comedia New Comedy Award, which is just bonkers. And now I'm kind of thinking, well, I don't know if it's a career, but it's going well and I'm loving it. So I'm going to carry on, see where it takes me.
And that's a really important point as well. I think we're very quick to assume that the minute we're good at something or the minute we're passionate about something, we need to market it. We need to create something from it. There is nothing wrong with just enjoying being on a stage, enjoying comedy.
No.
It doesn't have to necessarily go in that direction. I
think you can do whatever you want with it. There are people out there slogging hard and trying to make it. And for me, I think it's if I tried too hard, I think if I put too much pressure on it, it wouldn't be so much fun. And absolutely. I think you're right. You don't have to take something massively, massively seriously. I'm in a band as well, and we've all got day jobs. We love it. We play the music because we love it, but we're not slogging hard trying to make anything of it. We're just doing it because we love it, and I think that's really important.
I'd be interested to go into just on the point of, given the fact that your life coaching and your comedy is sort of centered around your circumstance, how have you used that to sort of elevate your game, be more personable to people, be funnier in comedy?
I think it's actually been quite cathartic for me as well, because I've spent a lot of my life trying to convince people that it's not a barrier. I've had to do job interviews where I convince people that, hey, just because I can't see, I can do this job. Here's how I can do it. Here's how it's not a barrier. Here's how it's not a problem. And, constantly trying to diminish it and diminish its effect. When actually, comedy came along and I realised it was an asset because for one, it makes me a little bit unique. It makes me stand out against other people. And it's been quite therapeutic for me to see it as an asset and not a problem that has to be overcome. And like I say, stuff happens. Stuff goes wrong. People say stupid things. I do stupid things. The other day I walked into GBK, which was next door to the venue I was supposed to be performing at. It happens. Stuff just goes wrong. And that I always say, I am not a genius comedy writer. I literally the comedy writes itself just in the form of my life. The second meeting of the comedy course I joined in 23, I managed to fall over a paving slab on the way there and walk in with bleeding hands.
Was that part of the
and black and blue bruised knees. And I'm like, if you're going to fall over anywhere, fall over on your way into a comedy course.
You can make a joke out of that.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, I did hear that you went, if I'm not mistaken, you went on stage one of your last goes and you were facing the wrong way as part of your joke.
That's my opener, yeah. I came up with it during the course and everyone was like, you've got to do it. And I was like, I hated it. It made me cringe because I'm like, come on, give me some credit. I would not make that mistake. But it's funny the way it gets a reaction because it gets a laugh straight away, but there's also definitely a percentage of the audience in utter terror thinking it is a mistake and not realizing it's a joke. So yeah, it's a very cheap, easy first joke. I've got used to it now. I've stopped hating it because everyone's like, no, it's a great joke. But yeah, for a while it really made me cringe.
How do you navigate the circumstance on that though? Because that was my initial response when my mum told me about it. I thought I'd be interested to see how you sort of made it obvious that it was a joke.
So I make sure that people see the white cane when I come on, so they know that I can't see. They know that's part of it, and then very quickly I start talking, and I just make it very clear with what I'm saying that it is a joke. And I mix up exactly what I say a little bit, and I'll come on and I'll just say something like, you're all looking lovely, and very quickly I'll be like, right, can I stop this rubbish? Can I turn around now? The first time I did it, I was like, if you all had a good enough look at my arse now, can I turn around? So yeah, I make it clear as quickly as I can, and it puts people at ease as well. It's like, okay, we're laughing at blindness, all right, and that's what I'm trying to do with it. That's the message. I want people to know that it's okay to laugh in a good way.
It gives them that sort of comfort in knowing this is part of your gig. We're allowed to let our hair down.
Yeah, because there's always that bit of like, oh my God, am I allowed to laugh at that?
Yeah,
am I laughing at a disabled person? And I really want to put people at ease as quickly as possible to be like, and I think my first gig, after the first couple of minutes of jokes about that, was like, if you're still not sure whether or not you can laugh, this is going to be a really long few minutes. So yeah, please do laugh. That is the point. And that's what I've always done, and I'm grateful to my family as well. It's just laughing at myself, being able to laugh at myself when shit goes wrong. And as you will know, both of our mums are very sarcastic people.
They do enjoy a bit of sarcasm.
They love the sarcasm, and that's been bred into me, being
very
able to laugh at myself.
You and me both.
Yeah.
I do notice though, I'd be interested to see how much this has helped you when you can sort of be comfortable enough with yourself to laugh at yourself. There are a lot of annoyances and irritations and discomforts that are just no longer in your ownership because you just don't allow that sort of unnecessary pressure onto yourself.
And that's one of the things that I talk about in my coaching is realizing that we can make that decision. We can actually decide. We can't decide the things that happen around us. We can't control the things that happen around us. But what we can control is our response. And this is one of those things that people don't think about and don't realise that it is actually a decision we can make. That is what we have control of. We don't have to be annoyed by things. And it's just a decision I've been making for a long time, not to get pissed off by everything. And there are a lot of angry disabled people out there. And this was always something my mum, again, was like, I do not want you to be one of those angry disabled people, because there will be people who will get instantly annoyed if somebody asks them if they need help when they don't, instantly angry if something goes wrong. And I have just always made that decision not to be that person. And I think, and again, that tends to be a big takeaway that I try and teach people in my coaching, is realise that it is a decision, that you can make that decision. And just make a different decision if the one you've been making hasn't been working for you.
Did you find that came to you innately, or was it something that you needed to sort of cultivate?
Definitely something I needed to learn. I haven't, people say to me like, oh, you're so laid back and you're so positive. And like I say, I suffered pretty badly with depression and panic attacks and anxiety as a teenager. And I've learned the hard way that that's not a way I want to live. It's taken time. It's taken time and learning and effort. I have not always been this way, for sure.
It's very much the beauty of the journey on that, though. That there's sort of, in moving through that time of, as you say, the anxiety, the depression, the real darkness that can come with our experiences, you do, as you say, sort of, so long as you choose to embark on that journey, you do find yourself in a position where you can take the good from what is otherwise or could be deemed a bad. You can find that silver lining, and in there you find the joy. I think a lot of people, I don't want to sound at all disrespectful, but I think a lot of people sort of attach to a negative and will stand up for it rather than try and get away from it.
Exactly. Yeah, there is that kind of victim mentality. People feel a victim of their circumstance, or even just a victim of their own thoughts and their own mental health. And it's people getting stuck in that first phase. And I completely agree with you that even from the worst things, there's always a learning. So when I learned NLP, I also learnt a therapy called timeline therapy, which is not well enough known, and it's a very, very good therapy for dealing with trauma. And it works in a way of kind of taking you back to the event, looking at it from above, looking at it objectively, and finding what you can learn, because there is always, always a learning, even from the worst possible events. And yeah, that's what timeline therapy teaches us. It's really powerful.
So how have you used timeline therapy?
So in 2022, I lost my first guide dog very, very suddenly. He became ill really suddenly, and we found he was riddled with cancer, and it was a decision to make. And it was no decision to make, and I let them euthanize him. And I realised a couple of months after that I wasn't just grieving, I was actually kind of in symptoms of PTSD. I was stuck in that event. I was constantly flashing back to that event. And I had been trained in timeline therapy at the time, so I went back to my trainer and I sort of explained what I was going through. And she said, let's give it a go. So I did a kind of 2-hour session with her. It's a really confronting therapy. It's not easy to do. You have to go back to that event in your mind. But what was quite extraordinary was I felt so much better, even pretty much instantly as soon as the session finished. And even I, trained to do it, I was skeptical because I was in such a bad way. But it worked phenomenally well. And it didn't take the grief away, it didn't take the loss away, but it took away a lot of that kind of trauma and got me out of that trauma phase. So it's massively powerful, and I wish more people knew about it.
It's a tremendously difficult path to cross, though, isn't it?
Yes.
You know that on the other side of that tremendous amount of pain, there is that growth, but there is still that quantity of pain that stands in front of you that you've got to push through.
You do, and it's not for the faint-hearted. But like I said, the point of timeline therapy is when you go back to that event and you look at it from above, the question is what are the learnings? And you stay there and you stay above that event until you find something you can learn from it. And even when you can't think, you're like, what can I possibly learn from this? Even if the learning, I think one of my learnings from going back to that was just that I will survive. Now we've got the song in our heads, but it's just that kind of, I did survive that day, and I'm still surviving, and I'm still coming through it. And even if that's your learning, that's still quite a good, important learning to recognise.
Absolutely. I think, as you say, it's a very difficult one to navigate, because if you say to someone, oh, there's always a good, when you're in the throes of the wicked, it's very difficult for you to go, what good is there in this? But as you say, you come across the realisation that you can survive things, you can move forward, there is a way forward. And I think, touching back to what I said momentarily ago, we sort of latch on to our negativity and consider it us. That's the bastardry of depression. It sort
becomes part of us.
Yeah, it becomes all of you in many respects. It becomes your friend, it becomes your comfort. That's one of the terrible things about these negative states of mind, is it becomes known, and within the known there is comfort, even if it's horrendous.
That's very well put. And you don't see it as the enemy anymore, but if you bring it back to seeing it as the enemy
in every respect.
Absolutely.
I'd be interested to see, though, just on the point, bringing it back to the comedy, how do you sort of navigate the self-deprecating element of your gig?
I do get called self-deprecating, and I'm a self-deprecating person, and maybe that's a negative thing, and I've flipped it around to use it as comedy, and just acknowledging the fact that I'm going to do stupid things, or things that aren't stupid, but just like blind things, and I'm going to make mistakes. And for me, like I say, it's been quite therapeutic to turn that into comedy, rather than beating myself up and going, oh, stupid. Even the other day, I went to watch a comedy night with some friends, and one of them gave me a lift home, and she stopped opposite my building, and she was like, right, you're pretty much opposite, and I went slightly the wrong way and missed my building, and I walked a little bit further up the other way, and then she called out to me. She was like, you need to go the other way, and I was like, yep, I was about to turn around, figured that out, and even that, I'm like, oh, you just look like an idiot walking off in the wrong direction, but it's one of those things. It's just one of those things, and it's I have to. Sometimes that is a bit hard. That even now I still have to work at that, not to cringe. But you turn it into comedy, because that's more fun than cringing, because it's just it's going to happen. It's
and as you say, back to the point we've just gone through of that sort of finding the silver lining. There is that. It's hard, as you say. That cringe element. You go, oh my god, I just walked into a wall. That's not nice. But as you say, the sooner you can sort of allow yourself to at least try and see it the right way, the better. And I think that's a good point as well. It's not. You don't have to inherently be able to go, that wasn't cringe at all, let me laugh at it. How funny. You can just try. And if this time you're still a bit like, oh my God, that was awkward. So what? Just try again.
Well, exactly. It's back to that thing of, if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah.
And it's make that decision. What do you want to do? I did a whole completely improvised, actually, thing at an open mic last week, because I came onto the stage and reached for the microphone and slightly boob grabbed the MC, and I'm like, oh shit. And it reminded me of a time that I did that in a toilet as well, because the hand dryer was running and I hadn't heard someone walk in, and I did a full on open palm boob grab, and it was awful, and I wanted the world the ground to swallow me whole, but I told that story on stage and it turned into comedy. So
how do you work with improv? It's something that's always amazed me when I see people go on stage and do improv, because it's so quick. I see when Jimmy Carr does the when he responds to the hecklers, I think the ability to do it is wonderful. How do you sort of create the scene?
I mean, I haven't done an awful lot of that. One thing I really want to try, which I haven't really done much of yet, is the MCing. Because it's always the MC who chats to the audience, and my worry is how to do that. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet, because you have to, you make eye contact with someone, you talk to someone in the crowd, so I haven't quite figured that out yet. But it's less improvised than you think. He'll have a load of stuff ready in his head. He will have written down the 20 most common jobs and written down a joke to make about them. Improv is never quite as improvised as you think. Sometimes, like I say, like last week, I came up and I did 5 minutes on stage, which I hadn't planned, just because it came to me. So that sort of happens. And because I'm a storytelling type comedian, I don't write jokes per se. It's all just stories from my life. And so if a story pops into my head that I didn't think about telling, but then I've decided to tell, that's my version of improv, really. It's just, this thing popped into my head, let's tell the story and see if other people find it funny.
Do you find yourself having to temper the story or white lie at any point, or are you full on, this is how it happened?
Very little. I try. A big part of my comedy is, I can say that 95% of it is true. But yeah, you can embellish. I think it's better if it is true. I think it's more relatable. And I think because of just the stuff that's happened... Oh, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, sorry, it popped up saying trying to reconnect. Because the stuff that happens...
I really don't mean to be rude saying this. How did you know?
Because it spoke in my ear.
Oh, I see. Makes sense.
So technology, everything talks in my life. Computers reading everything out loud. So I've been trying to make some jokes about this. Because I put a photo, so you can get like AI to just describe images, which has been a bit of a game changer in the last couple of years.
How useful is that? How sort of
so useful.
Yeah.
So I use my camera. There are apps now. I use an app that you can just point it at text and it will read text. So let's say you're in a restaurant, you want to read the menu, you can just take a photo of it, read it out loud. But I was quite offended when I put a photo of me on stage into AI the other day, and it described me as middle-aged. So I'm not okay with that.
No.
Like, middle-aged. So that's going in the material. So even
it's saying that there is a bald knobhead on the other side of the
yeah, middle-aged person. I'm like, oh, I'm not quite ready for that. Thanks, AI. It doesn't know how to be polite. You're like, how do I look? You look like shit. Yeah, AI doesn't lie. It says it as it sees it.
Sorry, I did cut you off just before we were.
I was trying to remember what I was talking about.
We went off the trail onto the AI's.
What was I just talking about?
Self-deprecating humour. How to sort of.
Yeah. It's. Oh no, sorry. We were talking about if I tell the truth or if I lie.
That's the podcast.
Yeah, no, it is 95% true. But to give you one example, I do a bit about spam emails. Because and this is true that I looked in my spam emails. This was ages ago, but looked in my spam email and the top email was "Book your test drive with Honda today," and I'm like, okay, they really don't do their research of who they're emailing, do they? So while that is true, I then go on to say, so I did, which I didn't. That's not true, but I think it's fairly obvious that that's not true. But yeah, the absolute majority of my comedy is fully true, and that's what I think makes it funny, is because you can pretty much tell that it is true. I don't have to lie. Yeah. I don't have to lie about the story that I oven cooked a cheesecake from Frozen once instead of a toad in the hole, because that's true. I don't have to make that shit up.
Put the toad in the hole in the fridge and the cheesecake in the oven.
They were both round. What can I say?
That's close enough.
That was pre-technology that you can use to read things.
That was when AI couldn't tell you this is a fucking cheesecake.
Yes, exactly. That's a very ancient story, but it's a true story, so I'm going with it.
Do you find, is there any sort of off-limits topics for you when it comes to comedy, or is it fair game?
I think the really important thing is that you don't, what they call, punch down in comedy. So I will only make comedy about myself. So I will be self-deprecating, but I wouldn't make comedy about something like people in wheelchairs, right, because that's not my disability. So yeah, that's where you draw the line, and I think I can only make comedy that is self-deprecating and not depreciating others. And I think that's a really important line to tread. A few comedians and I were recently talking about somebody we've come across on the scene who, let's say, is not that popular. And he actually went on stage after me at a gig, an open mic, and came out and started making jokes and being like, "No, Sydney, I'm over here," and that wasn't cool. That's not cool. And I'm like, you don't have the right. I can take the piss out of blindness. You can't. That's what I think.
Would there ever be a point where that would sort of be, say for instance you had two, what's the respectful way of saying it?
What, two blind comedians?
Yeah, two blind comedians. Would that...
It has happened.
That'd be fair game?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
there aren't any others in Brighton that I know of, but there's a guy that lives down in Southampton who comes this way sometimes. And we were on the same open mic once, and it became a running joke through the whole thing, really. And a couple of comedians who went on after he and I had both been on were kind of like, "Oh, sorry, I'm not blind." One of them came on and went, "God, it's just not enough blind people today." It became a running joke through the night just because there were two of us. And I came on after him and I made a joke like, "Oh God, I'm usually the only one. Come on, stop stealing my thunder." So yeah, you definitely can make jokes around that. And particularly at a comedy night full of comedians, you're guaranteed a laugh, and you have an understanding between you that nothing's meant in a nasty way. Everything's just meant as a joke.
But as for the other bloke, you say to him, "I can still throw a fucking bottle at your head."
And I'd probably hit him as well.
Yeah, and I will. I will find you.
Your head's making noises.
Yeah, your stupid mouth is making noises as well. How affected are you by stage fright? How does that come across?
I think I'm just very lucky in that. I mean, for one, when I started doing comedy, It was the first time I've really been on stage by myself, but it's not the first time I've been on stage. You know, I came to Brighton to study music. I'm very used to being on stages, but I'm used to playing guitar or bass and hiding behind the band. So this has been new. It's more vulnerable. It's me out there on my own, and I think the main reason why I don't suffer with a lot of nerves and stage fright is what we were saying earlier about how I've just been doing this for fun. I haven't been putting a huge amount of pressure on myself to be perfect. Sometimes I've gone on stage not being entirely sure of which bit I'm going to talk about, which bit's going to come out. I think the most nervous I've been was obviously last month when I did the Comedian New Comedy Award final, and that one I did give a shit about. And I always say as a coach, the key way to battle nerves is to be as prepared as possible. Because if you're about to go on stage and you're not sure what you're going to talk about, of course you're going to be nervous. If you're not sure what's going to come out, if you're not sure how well it's going to go, of course you're going to be nervous. So the day of the final, I paced my living room and I recited my 5 minutes, and I recited it and I timed it and I recited it and I recited it all day. And I don't normally do that. But for that, because I was worried about the time limit as well, because they were quite strict on the time limit. So I rehearsed and I rehearsed and I rehearsed. I rehearsed the hardest I've ever rehearsed in my life, and it paid off. I think it was the performance of my life, and I didn't necessarily think I deserved to win it because it was such a high quality, high standard night. But I had done my bit, I'd done my work, and I think that's what I usually say to people is if you're nervous, prepare. Because if you know what you're going to do like the back of your hand, why would you need to be nervous?
There's a certain Benjamin Franklin's got a very good quote on this point.
Yeah, what's that?
Fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's absolutely
right.
That is,
and as well, I think people underestimate how low the bar is. You go 10 minutes before doing something and just run and just sort of get something seared into the brain. Of course, it's much better if you can do an hour or longer, but so long as you just refresh it, just get it in there, keep it. Yeah. Your short-term memory is a wonderful thing.
Some people's, mine's not.
People's, yeah. Well, mine's not so wonderful, but it's serviceable, let's say.
Yeah.
How do you navigate though? That you said there that you didn't feel as though you actually deserved to win. How do you sort of rationalise that in your head? What makes you think that?
There were 9 comedians in the final. They were definitely, and I was watching all of them. So some people were just hanging out in the green room and not listening to other people. And I wanted to know, and I wanted to get a feel for the room. So I snuck out and I was at the back and I was seeing how everyone did. And there were some really truly funny people there. The standard was really high, but I did know that my set went well. I got on stage, I knew I'd nailed it. I knew I had done my best. I knew people laughed. I could feel that it was a good reception. And after I'd seen everyone, when everyone had performed, I thought, I got a good chance of runner-up. That's what I thought. I knew there would be a winner and I knew there would be 1 or 2 runners-up. And I thought, I know I did well, but there's other people here who did really well. So it was just impossible to call. And it was only when there was one guy in the final who was far more pro than I am, done far more gigs, is already gigging all over the place. And it was when he was announced as runner-up, and that was the first moment that I thought, okay, like he's a runner-up. Now this is anybody's. And I did have a moment, and I only had a moment because it was not long after they announced him as runner-up that they then announced me as the winner. But it was seconds before that I thought, maybe? Could it be? Could it actually be? But I still certainly didn't believe it until they said my name. And even then, I mean, there's this awful video of my friend filmed the moment that they announced me as the winner and they got me on stage, plonked a microphone in front of me, and I just had no words. I had not. It felt like tempting fate to think about what I would say if I won, so I didn't. So I didn't plan it. So you could very much tell I didn't plan it.
Yeah, you can. Well, I suppose you can make a good point of that. There's a joke to be found in there. if I was
Well,
smart.
of course, the obvious joke would have been to come on and to say, I didn't see this coming. But I thought of that the next day. Come on. Such an obvious joke.
Low hanging fruit.
That's what I should have said. But yeah, that came to me the next day, as these things often do.
On that point, I'd be interested, just before I say what I was going to say, what was that sort of... I'd be interested to look into what the feeling is when you hear the laughs, when you make a joke, when you sort of feel that it's been reciprocated well. And how did that feeling compare to when you went on stage and you realised, fuck me, I've done it. I am the G.
I mean, making people laugh is, I think, it's one of the best feelings there is. I've always liked making people laugh. I've always kind of been the funny one, which is why people have been telling me to do this for years. But I just get such a buzz from making people laugh, and I knew I was hooked on the first gig I did. That first gig I did, we had a room full of people. It was just friends and family of the people who'd done the course. So it was a really friendly, welcoming crowd, ready to laugh. But I knew then that it had gone well, and I knew then that I absolutely loved it. So I kept doing it. And I guess I've been lucky. I haven't had many moments that have flopped and people haven't laughed when I've been expecting them to. It's a wonderful feeling. It's an amazing feeling. And I mean, the feeling of winning an award for it was also incredible. I think it took a little bit of time to sink in, but it's also it's validating. It's saying, okay, industry professionals have given me this. Like, shit, maybe I'm actually good at this. And it's very validating, and it's very much, I have to acknowledge that this is something I'm actually good at. Like, holy shit, who knew?
I can actually make people laugh. After all this time of
Yeah.
making people laugh, I now know
Yeah.
that I can make them laugh. It's
Yeah.
it's a nice feeling, actually, that you
That's
don't want to
amazing.
rely on validation from elsewhere, but
No.
let's have it right. It's a wonderful feeling. When
It is.
someone tells you you can do this, and as you
Yeah.
say, people that are of prestige telling you that you can do it, it's a wonderful feeling. Pushes you
Yeah.
forward.
And it's a really good point that we shouldn't rely on it, that we should rely on our own belief in what we can do. Absolutely, we should. With something like comedy, it's quite difficult, because if people aren't laughing, you've got to take that as a hint that something's not right. It is quite reliant on external validation, which is tricky. But you've got to get on stage in the first place. You've got to believe in yourself in the first place, and I think that's the difference. That's what you've got to let it do. And then you get the external validation of, hey, yeah, okay, I thought that would make people laugh, and it did.
And it did.
That's
As you
cool.
say, that it's part of the game. You can't get away from. You and I both here are doing something where it's like, if no one else likes it, you're
Yeah.
fucked. You know,
Yeah.
you might be going, oh, I'm so funny, or wow, what a wonderful speaker. But if everyone else is going,
Yeah.
this bloke's a bellend, it's
Yeah.
not gonna do a great deal.
And you do see people on the scene doing it. You see comedians on the scene coming out, and you're like, nobody's laughing. Are you not hearing that?
Do you hear
they carry
is there
on?
a sort of element of arrogance in comedians? Do you see that very often?
I think there can be. I think there can be people who really aren't as funny as they think they are. It's generally, the one thing I have found is it's a really lovely community, and it's not competitive. There's very little in the way of arrogance or anything nasty. It's actually generally a really lovely community, and when you get somebody who doesn't fit into that community, someone who does appear arrogant, they don't last long, in terms of they will be rejected by the community. I mean, I'm in Brighton, so it's not London. It's a small scene, and personality is important. And if you're doing all right on stage, but you're a dick off stage, you're not going to do well in this scene.
Do people sort of know you off the stage as well then?
People get to know you, yeah. When you do the open mics, you're there, you chat to people, you have conversation with people beforehand. I mean, most of the judgment is what happens on stage, what you say on stage. But yeah, you've got to be a likable person as well, or you won't get booked for things if they don't like you as a person.
And it seeps through as well. I think people sort of, if you were to see two sides of someone, it immediately deprecates what you're seeing that you do like, because you go, yeah, well, this is not even. I think one of the greatest elements, one of the things I'm so fond of in the comedians that I enjoy, is you feel as though they are talking as though they were in a pub, just on a stage.
Just being themselves.
Yeah, just being themselves. And I think when the element of sort of play acting comes too close to the forefront, it loses something. There's got to be that sort of flow. I'd be interested on that point. How much sort of planning do you do when it comes to your sets? I know you just touched on the fact that you were doing a lot of practicing, but sort of when it comes to taking the stories from your own life, do you put them onto paper or do you sort of run them through your mind? What's the process there?
So I did a one-day workshop last year with quite a successful comedian and writer, and he said to us then, he said, you should be scripting it word for word. And before I did that workshop, I never did that. I would write bullet points. I'd write like prompts for each bit, each story. I have since scripted more word for word, and it does work, to be fair. I don't always do it. Again, for the Comedia final, I did, and it obviously paid off. So yeah, it's a combination of when something new pops into my head, like a new story that I haven't told, I will write it out fairly properly. Then what I do is I arrange it. So if I know I'm doing 5 minutes or 7 minutes or 10 minutes, you try and write it out to be like, right, how to make sure you've got enough material, the right amount for the time limit. It's all done by time limits. Every comedy spot you get given a certain number of minutes. So you have to plan for that. So yeah, there does have to be planning, and I think the longer I'm doing it, and the more now I've won the award, I'm sort of recognised as a bit of a pro now, and I'm being offered money, little bits of money, very little bits of money, but still. As soon as money comes into it and they're paying me, I feel a bit more pressure. You have to be a bit more professional. So I'm definitely making more of an effort to write better and to write more and learn it more specifically, because even just a couple of words difference could be the difference between something being funny and not so funny. It has to be, you have to get the wording right to make it stick, and to be like, right, that is the funniest way of saying it. And that's where the open mics and the new material nights are good, because you can play with stuff, try and say it in a different way. But yeah, nowadays the more pro gigs, the gigs that aren't new material that are expected to be the best, that's when I will write it out and rehearse it. I've always hated the rehearsing part, but it really has to be done.
It makes the end product what the end product needs to be.
Yeah.
Have you bombed on stage when you've done open mics?
I've been very lucky, and generally, no, not a lot. I've had a couple of bits I'm like, okay, that didn't go down as well as I thought it was going to. I've never properly bombed. I kind of feel like, is it going to happen? Is it something I need to... Yeah, I don't know. I think just obviously what I've done has landed well, has been really well received. I actually did the London Comedy Store do what they call a gong night, and that is where 3 members of the audience have a red card each, and if all 3 go up, the gong goes and you're off. So you've got to entertain people for 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, or however long you get before the audience kick you off. And I got the full 5 minutes. I got 1 red card at one point, but I didn't get gonged off, that was quite something as well. So yeah, I've been very lucky and very well received. And like I say, I think that's just the natural comedy of my life, rather than me being an excellent comedy writer.
So very much all 3 of the things that you're involved in, from music to the coaching to the comedy, sort of really seep into your character. They're sort of what you want to... You very much practice what you preach on this point.
Yeah, I think I do. I've always said I'm not as good a musician as I could be, because I don't practice. And this has been a really interesting thing, because I've never really found the joy of playing music by myself. I love doing that with the band. I love doing that with people. So the comedy has been something really new in that way, that it is just me being me. It's just me doing my thing. and I'm not reliant on anyone else. Like I've always said, I'd play music gigs every week if I could, but it's always dependent on other people. So the comedy is just mine, and it's quite empowering in that way, and it's become a big part of me, and now I can't imagine not doing that. But I can't imagine not playing music either. But yeah, this is a different thing. It's just me doing me.
I would argue, though, for all three of the things that you do, it's sort of your technique, your ability, your skill being pushed out to other people. You know, be it the solo element of the comedy or the interactive element of the communication or the coaching, rather. It's still sort of taking your experiences and your perspective and giving it out to someone else. How much value
and it's why I'm a
find
coach
in doing that?
It's why I'm a coach, not a counsellor. Counsellors...
Sorry, what is the difference? What would you sort of attribute that to?
There's two main differences in my mind. One is that counselling can be very much about talking things through, talking things that have happened, so things in the past. And whereas coaching is very forward-thinking, coaching is very much more about where am I now, where do I want to get to, what do I want, what needs to change. It's very forward-thinking. It's a bit more strategy-based. It's a bit more about techniques. But also the thing I like about coaching more than counselling is as a counsellor, you're really kind of not supposed to say much. As a counsellor, you're a listener. Now, I'm not saying there's no value in counselling, because there absolutely is. And I've had a counsellor as someone just to chat to for a long time. But I like you say, I can put my personality into coaching. I can help people. I can hear, a lot of what I do is I'll hear the way people are speaking, and I'm hearing the language, and I'm going, right, that's really negative language. Here's how we can change it. Here's how you could say something differently. Like the example of needing to think about what you do want, not what you don't want. Just that simple stuff. And I can help people in that way. And I'll pull people up on their language, and I'll be like, right, no, how do we turn that around? And that to me is a big difference. So coaching really lets me still use my personality. It's not about me, but it's about how I can help somebody to think in a different way or approach things in a different way. And you don't get that with counselling.
I'd be interested to see your opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think the way that we say things influences the way that we think it, or the way that we respond to the thought? Do you think if people could sort of cultivate a stronger ability to actually use their words, that they would be able to be happier?
It's massive. It's massive. So obviously neuro-linguistic programming is all about language. So there's a coach that I particularly love that I've taken a lot of his learnings from. It's actually another Sydney Banks. And he recognised you have a thought and the feeling follows. So we can't massively control the feeling that attaches itself to the thought. But you don't get feelings without thoughts. So if we think in a different way, we can feel differently. So I'll pull people up on things like, I remember I used to work with a student, and she'd be like, well, that was a disaster. And I'm like, was it? Like, an earthquake is a disaster. A tsunami is a disaster. You just burnt your toast. And it's things like that, to think about how we frame things, how we think about them. And I always pull people up on things like at 10 a.m. and they'll say, oh, it's just going to be one of those days. And I'm like, well, if you tell yourself that, that's how you're going to feel. But it's only 10 o'clock. Maybe a couple of things have gone wrong, but maybe the rest of the day could go differently. But you've got to be open to that in your mind. So, the language we use, and generally the language we use out loud, reflects what we're thinking inside. And it's maybe where I can be a little bit hypocritical, because I can be self-deprecating. Whereas if someone's saying those things out loud, I know that that's what they're thinking inside, and I'll encourage them to flip that around. So it's, the language we're using in our minds when we're thinking about ourselves, when we're thinking about other things. Are you thinking about something you need to do tomorrow, thinking, oh, that's going to be really hard? If you tell yourself it's going to be really hard, it's going to feel really hard, because that's the story you're telling yourself. So, yeah, flipping things around, thinking about them differently. I'm going to do well at that. This is going to go well. That's going to be fun. Or, this is going to be a crap day. the feelings come with the thoughts. And that's where believing in yourself, one of my favourite quotes, I think it's a Henry Ford, which is the whether you believe you can do a thing or not, you're right. And I love that one. Have you heard that one before?
That's really nice. I hadn't heard that before.
Because it becomes your self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're telling yourself you can do something, you're halfway to being able to do it. Whereas if you're telling yourself you can't, you probably will be right, because you're telling yourself you can't. So it's going to be really hard to do. So yeah, in a nutshell, I could talk about this forever. But yeah, the language you're using, the thoughts you're having, hugely important.
I think, as you say, it's absolutely right. How many people will say, oh, it's just one of those days, or I've woken up on the wrong side of the bed. And by the end of the day, as you say, it's self-fulfilling, as you put it. You can't help but just lean into the narrative. We're wonderful creators of a narrative, and we refuse to let it go. I think a really helpful reframe that I found on this, when I used to be seemingly addicted to saying I've had a bad day, is did you have a bad day, or did one thing go wrong? Was it a bad day or a bad hour? It's like, and that's a really important point. I think we assume that if one thing goes wrong, that we just have to follow the trend there, and you don't.
Yeah.
You could have a bad start to the day and end up having a really good day. And I think if you realise that that's perfectly possible, you open yourself up to it happening.
Exactly. It's about letting something go and not lingering, not keeping it with you. You know, if something does go wrong, I always think, well, don't let that ruin your whole day. Let it go. You know, be present. Being present is something I'm big on as well. Is kind of not living in the past, because things have gone wrong in the past. Things always have, and it's so important. You know, we've all heard the phrase, like, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes.
And I'm like, don't hold on to the straws. If you only hold on to one straw at a time, the straws aren't going to break the camel's back.
Yeah. Drop the fucking.
So, exactly. Every time something happens, and I've worked with a lot of people who struggle with this, and they'll just be like, oh, well, that happened, then that happened, then that happened. And I'm like, if you let each straw go, none of them on their own are going to break your back. So yeah, it's such a common and innocent mistake that everybody's made at some point.
I think humans can't help but do this a lot of the time. I think we're so poised.
We think too much.
To either, yes, exactly that. I think we can't help but either look backwards or look forwards. And as you touched on earlier, it's sort of, oh, what's happening tomorrow? What does it matter what happens tomorrow? You've got today.
Exactly.
I've noticed frequently I've had to pull myself on this sort of... I get a tremendous amount of anxiety from doing the podcast. It's something that I wrangle with. And for days before that, I think, oh, I've got to make sure everything's all right. Have I got my notes? And I'm worried about it. And I think, you will be okay. You will be fine. You're just talking. This is something you know you can do.
What could actually go wrong?
And it's the catastrophizing that comes with it as well. It's like, oh, what if I somehow just lose the ability to speak? Well, that hasn't actually happened before, so it's probably.
Of course,
not
it hasn't.
Yeah. But
have you read that book, The Power of Now?
No. What's the Power of Now?
It's a very famous book, and it talks about, and I do preach this a lot in my coaching, because it talks about how anxiety in particular is always rooted either in the past or in the future. So it's either worrying about something that's happened before that maybe you're worrying will happen again, or it's like you're describing, you're thinking about something that hasn't happened yet and you're catastrophizing. So the Power of Now teaches us, if we are literally present in the moment, there generally is nothing to be anxious about. You think about you and me, we're sitting here right now, or hopefully somebody's listening, and you're just sitting listening or talking. There's nothing, I don't know about you, right now, there's nothing in this room for me to be anxious about. There's nothing happening to me right now to make you anxious. And that's what the book teaches us, is just take away the past, take away the future. If you are solely in the moment, there's nothing to worry about.
Almost.
It's a powerful message. Sorry?
Almost invariably.
Yes. Pretty much. And this one helped me, because I used to have quite a strong fear of flying. And I realised my fear wasn't flying. My fear was potentially dying, falling, something going wrong. And I used that book quite a lot to be like, right, no, what is happening right now? Oh, right now I have to sit still and be served food and drink and not have to move. That's all right. Yeah, that's okay.
God, this is... How do I deal with this?
Yeah.
It's grapes, though.
Exactly.
Have you dabbled with meditation at all on that point?
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. I don't think I'm very good at it. I can't do quick ones. It takes me a little bit of time to shut down. It's something I've tried a lot over the years. Unfortunately, one of the side effects, because I can't see, I don't have light and dark. So this can cause a sleep disorder called non-24, which is basically where your sleep-wake circadian rhythm is out of whack with the man-made concept of the 24-hour day, because your sleep cycle is very triggered by light and dark. So your brain knows it's light, it's time to wake up, or it's dark, it's time to go to sleep. So I don't have that. So sometimes my sleep cycle can be really out of whack, and my brain will suddenly go in the middle of the day like, oh, I want to sleep now. And I think that's... So I've tried to meditate to teach my brain that it's sleep time. But I think also the fact that for me, sort of closing my eyes doesn't make any difference in that way. So yeah, sometimes I find the switching off part quite difficult. I had to be hypnotized to learn how to be a hypnotist. And again, I struggle with it. Have you done a lot of meditation?
I have to say, I've done quite a bit of meditation now, but it's still, it's one of those things that, as you say, I wouldn't exactly say I'm the best at it. I think it's similar to this sort of the perpetual want of being in now, finding this moment, not thinking about the past or the future. I think it's one of those things that you're constantly chasing the carrot on points like these. I don't think you ever get to a stage where you're just a good meditator, or you can just sit in this moment. You've constantly got to renew it.
Yeah, and it is a skill.
Yes,
it is definitely a skill to teach your brain to relax, and to teach your brain you don't have to think all the time. So yeah, some people find that really easy. Some people do need to practice it, but yeah, it is a skill.
Particularly in the Western world as well, I'd find it's constant go, and it's so difficult.
Our world is not made for it, is it? It's there's a Buddhist centre near where I live, which I need to go to more, and I've been to once or twice, and it's so lovely, and you just do forget about the world outside, and you're taught to switch off and to meditate, and there's a lot about Buddhism that I think is very healthy and is a healthy lifestyle, but yeah, the world we live in here is difficult. It doesn't encourage that, does it?
I frequently find myself wishing I could retreat to a cave in the edge of a mountain in Asia. How has Buddhism helped you?
I like the ethos of self-care. I went to a Church of England primary school, and that teaches you all about being a good Samaritan and looking after everybody else, which is fine. And I think, part of being a nice person is looking after everybody else. But I go back to that, when you we spoke about airplanes before, when you catch a flight and they go through the safety demo, and they say, if the oxygen masks come down, put yours on before you help somebody else. Because if you're trying to help someone else put their oxygen mask on, but you don't have yours on, if you pass out, who are you going to help then?
Yeah.
You have to put your mask on to then be able to help other people. And I really like that as an analogy for self-care, because it's not selfish to have to do your self-care, to be in that position to help other people. They're both important, but self-care has to come first sometimes. And I think it's an often a misconception that people think that means you're being selfish, but you do have to look after yourself. And I think that's something that Buddhism teaches us quite well, is to do what you've got to do sometimes for your own self-care. If that means switching off, if that means ignoring your phone for a while, to switch off, that's fine. That's all okay. We should be doing that.
I totally agree. I'm really glad that you've made that point, actually, because I think selfishness or being selfish is something that is perpetually considered a negative, as you say. You can't you could never say to someone, wow, you're so selfish, well done. No one says that. You go, oh, fucking selfish. But I totally agree. I think if you've got your house in order, you can show up for everyone else. How are you supposed to be the best version of yourself to other people if you're not feeling like the best version of yourself?
Exactly.
You know,
And there's such that difference between positive selfishness and negative selfishness. We just think all selfishness is negative, but there is a difference that's quite important to find.
if you take care of yourself, I notice this, my propensity for kindness is increased tenfold if I am in order, if I have done what I wanted to do today, if my work is the way it should be. If I haven't done that, I'm going to be more irritable. I'm not going to want to spend, you know, case in point, if I haven't done the work that I want to do today, I'm going to be far more strict on how much time can I spend with this person because I need to go and I need to go and get that thing done. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to constantly be clock watching someone because it's not fair. It's not fair on them, and it's not happy for me. I think
exactly.
If you could find a reframe with selfishness where you look and you go, I'm doing this for me, and in turn others will benefit, everyone wins. I find this with philanthropy, is I think if you look at sort of giving a gift, the feeling of giving a gift, it feels good for you. You like that feeling. Now, if you give people gifts or you buy someone something because it makes you feel good, then I think that's good all round. They get a gift, they like it, you feel good, you'll do it again. Good. I think if selfishness is, as you put it, coming from a positive perspective of this will make me feel good and someone will benefit from it, I think go ahead. I think that's a wonderful thing.
And there has to be a line. You know, I don't believe in selflessness that leaves you too depleted. I don't believe in going too far the other way. You know, and it was something I had to learn a lot, particularly, you know, I mentioned about when I was grieving, when I lost my dog. I had to put boundaries in place of things that I just couldn't cope with. And sometimes that was whatever other people had going on. Sometimes I didn't have capacity for someone else's problems. And sometimes I did. And you do, it's that word boundaries, which all therapists love, and balance. And we need balance. We need to be balanced. And again, that's another thing that Buddhism talks about is balance. And it is finding that balance of what you need to do for you, what you have capacity to do for other people. And it shouldn't be too much of either. It should be somewhere nicely in the middle.
How do you strike balance?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's why I asked it.
Now you're challenging me because I should have an answer. I'm a massive extrovert, and like I said right at the beginning of this, I do so many things. I have my day job, and then generally I have something to do after it. So this weekend I've got 4 nights of gigs in a row: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 3 of those are comedy. The Friday one in the middle is music. And that can sometimes I will do too much, and sometimes I will realise. You know, I've had weeks before where I've had something after work every single evening of the week for maybe 7 nights in a row, and that can be a bit much. So for me, my balance is taking time out. I live by myself, which is one of the reasons why I keep myself really busy, because I don't like just sitting here on my own. But sometimes sitting here on my own and, I don't know, binging something on Netflix is what I need to do and what I should do to chill. So yeah, balance is something we should all be looking for, and I'm again going to say that I'm not always the absolute best at it. But generally, my body will tell me if I'm not doing that, and I'll, you know, fatigue. You know, if you suddenly feel too fatigued and too tired, and your body's saying to you, "You're doing too much," you know, slow down. I'm a big believer in listening to your body, because our bodies are actually quite good at telling us what they need.
Yes,
So yeah, and sometimes I will ignore mine, and I'll do too much, and I'll be knackered, and that's not, you know, we all do it. But yeah, I'm a big believer in listening to your body.
I am by no means a paragon of balance. I think it's something that is a very difficult balance to strike, ironically.
Yeah.
I think as well, though, something that sort of helped me on that point, and I'm glad that you mentioned Netflix for this, is I don't think balance means 50-50. I think balance, if you're working towards something, I think inherently you can't be balanced, because you have to push your resources further in one direction. So you have to push something that way, and in turn, something falls by the wayside. I think it's more like 70-30 when it comes to sort of achieving what you want to achieve, but getting enough rest and rehabilitation to not get the burnout, not feel like you're just struggling, not just keeping away from getting into that zone where you just don't even enjoy what it is that you should be enjoying. Absolutely. I noticed with me that if I don't schedule that downtime, I won't enjoy what I should be enjoying. You know, I don't. The podcast takes its toll, and it's hard, and it's got work to it. But I like doing it. It's not work as such, and I'm sure you'll understand that sentiment.
That's the right kind of work.
Exactly that. What I enjoy, though, I notice something that I struggle with when it comes to this point is I'll get quite a lot of guilt around not working, which means that really throws the balance out of sorts, because you then go, oh, what? You've been not working for an entire hour. What do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
I find, though, something that's really pleasant to sort of consider is if you can't strike this balance, you can't do anything worth doing. You can't continue pushing in the direction you want to push in. And I think we sort of assume that if I just keep working, then I'm just going to keep getting better. I'm just, you know, if I do all work all the time, then I'm just going to keep getting better. No, you won't. At some point, it will fall away, and you won't be doing.
It's how you burn out.
Exactly, it's burnout.
It is how you burn out. And you're right. And I love your point. I love the point about balance not being 50-50. It's absolutely true. And it will be different for everybody. The right balance of things will be different for everyone. If 70-30 is your sweet spot, great. Some people might need to be 50-50.
Yeah.
You know, everyone has different energy levels. Everyone has different... There's the introverted and the extroverted. And the introverted people need much more in the way of time away from people than the extroverted. The extroverts will be refreshed by time with people. So it's all about finding your personal, completely unique individual balance. And that's hard. It's not always easy to do. It's a lesson, isn't it? You learn as you go.
It's trial and error.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something as well that we should open ourselves up to, is we've got
Isn't
this
life trial and error?
Exactly. You've got, and this is the thing as well, you've got time. You can make the errors. You know, I've frequently found myself clock watching and thinking, God, I've got to get, but I need to make sure by this age that I'm doing this, or you're constantly watching that clock and forgetting the fact that you've got plenty of time to do what you need to do.
And you've generally got more than one shot.
Exactly. And we've got this ingrained idea that it's now or never. We're constantly on the clock. I recently came to understanding that I'm a 20-year-old, and you know, if by 25 things are going well, I mean, that my sort of quota in some respects is I want to be successful in the image of my mind by sort of 25. I want to be where I want to be. And I thought about this. I thought, God, I don't have long, 20, 25. I thought, are you stupid? That's 5 years. Do you know how long 5 years?
Yeah.
We've got time.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of my favourite statements, something I learned in NLP, one of my favourite quotes, this is another of my favourite quotes, is there is no failure, only feedback.
That's good.
I love that one because it's true. If you do fail at something, there'll be reasons why. And again, we're back to the fact that you can learn from everything. It's like if you fail an exam, that's the first time we come across the word failure, isn't it, really, in school? But if you fail an exam, there'll be something that says, well, these are the questions you did wrong. This is what you needed to do. So then you take that feedback and you go again. So there is no failure, only feedback. And I think you can apply that to life. And just, something goes wrong, you don't achieve what you wanted to achieve the first time. Generally, there's a second opportunity to do that. And whether you're successful by 25 or 35 or 45, it doesn't matter. It's good to have an idea. I love that you've got an idea of where you want to be in 5 years' time. It's useful to have that, but it's not the be-all and end-all. And the time frame can shift. And maybe you'll be more successful than you're expecting by the time you're 23. Who knows? Isn't it kind of fun not knowing, though? I like that.
Heaven forbid our minds just think, this might actually go well. That's something, that's something that we need to learn, is we catastrophise to the nth degree, and sometimes it could just go well.
Yeah, it's like, what if I'm not successful? What if I am?
Yeah,
let's consider that.
Yeah, have we paid any attention to the fact that we can't help but just hypothesise that this is all going to go up in flames? Well, maybe It won't.
Hence why I end up speechless, tongue-tied, and looking like an idiot when I won an award I didn't even consider that I might win.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. You can't even. We're so good at thinking, how could this go wrong? Like back to the point of worrying about tomorrow. We think, oh, how could I fuck this up? Well, what happens if you go on the stage and you tear it up? Everyone laughs, and it's wonderful.
Exactly.
I do
apply that to everything.
I would be interested to see how much the complexion of our mind would change if we were open to that thought.
Yeah, because it's all just a story we're telling ourselves. So I always say, change the story. You're thinking catastrophizing. What if that goes wrong? Change the story. What if that goes right? What would that look like? You know, paint a different picture.
You are the author.
Like you say, we're so creative. Our minds are so creative. We just use them in the wrong way a lot of the time.
Our minds are like the Picasso if he was inherently pessimistic.
That's a quote in itself.
There you go.
It's a good one. I like that.
I enjoy that thought of the reframe, though, of we seem to be ingrained in this sort of, we have to look at things. I suppose my sort of understanding of this, having dabbled just a little bit in evolutionary psychology, is I assume that in being pessimistic, we're more likely to keep ourselves safe if you look at it on an animalistic sense. If you are the loincloth wearing, spear wielding caveman who is traversing the woodlands and you see a tiger and you go, what's that? I'm going to go and say hello to it. Your genes probably aren't going to be propagated very well. If you're the caveman that goes, what the fuck is that? I'm going that way. Then I suppose that is sort of inbuilt into us that pessimism.
It's that whole fail to prepare thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fail to prepare to fail. So we think we have to think about the worst case scenario. But you're right, we're not cavemen anymore. We don't always need to think about that. It's not life or death. You're probably right in that that's where that comes from, for sure.
But as you say, though, it is that sort of armouring yourself against what could go wrong, which definitely has its place. That's obviously valuable, because if you can look at what could go wrong, you can look at the exam paper and go, right, that's where I'm weak, let me rectify that. But we don't look... I mean, think about it. Think about whenever you've opened up an exam paper, how much attention do you pay to the ones with the tick? None. You don't care about them.
Always, where did I go wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so negative. We need to celebrate our successes. We really need to celebrate our successes. I know my sister, my incredibly intelligent sister, was devastated that she didn't get any 9s in her GCSEs. But I think she got all 8s. And I'm like, come on, seriously. You've done so well, but you're upset that you didn't get the top mark. And it's like, give yourselves a break, everybody. Let's celebrate what we have done and not what we haven't. And like you say, that comes into the guilt. You talk about the guilt, like if you've not done work for an hour. So what? Think about all the work you have done until that point. It's, what have we achieved? Not what have we not achieved. It's so, I don't know why we find it so much easier to do that. And it's about, a lot of the work I do with people as a coach is teaching people new habits. Because the way you think is a habit. Like a physical habit, like biting your nails or any other physical habit. We don't think about thinking as a habit, but it is a habit. Looking at the negative, looking at what went wrong rather than what went right. Thinking about what might go wrong, not what might go right. It's all just a habit, which we can change, but you have to consciously want to change that. You have to make effort to change it, especially if it's been the habit of your lifetime. It's building a new habit, which you can absolutely do if you want to and you're motivated to.
What's the most common habit people do that denigrates themselves?
The most common, I think it's what we've been talking about. It's worrying, it's anxiety. I think that to me is one of the most common ones that I come across. And as a society, we seem to be getting more and more anxious. I've worked with school-age kids. It's getting younger, anxiety's getting younger. I think social media has a lot to do with that. The fact that everyone has access to the news all the time. Anxiety is just rife, and worrying about things ahead of time. I think that's possibly the most common thing I come across. And it's so damaging as well. It can take over your life.
Absolutely. How do you think the
If you
news
let
plays
it.
into that?
Because the news is never good, is it?
No.
They very rarely share good news. The news is all, particularly, God, at the moment, it's wars in different countries. It's what's going wrong in the world, what's bad in the world. There's no, sometimes you might get one little feel-good news story at the end of all the headlines, and it's so often just bad, and it's popping up. I unfollowed, it was a page on Facebook, I think it was The Mirror, because everything they posted, the post started with tragic news or horrible news, terrible news today. Every single post was like that. And I'm like, I'm unfollowing that because that is not doing anybody any good. It's just, you don't need to see those words. Again, like we've talked about, the importance of language. If those are the words we're
feel
feeding
like
in.
you've got to take a responsibility on that as well.
Yeah. You choose what you want to take in. It's there. Like I say, I unfollowed that page because I just kept seeing it, and I'm like, no, I'm not interested in if that's all you're going to talk about. So yeah, it's a conscious decision. I was working with quite a young teenager a few years ago when North Korea were doing all these tests on their nuclear missiles, and she kept soaking it in and being like, I'm really worried about this, and I'm like, stop reading it, because it's miles away. You don't need all that worry about it.
Mr. Kim is not going to go, this lady is worried, I'm going to stop making these nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
It's not.
And that is such a good point. The thing I think about, and the thing I ask people to think about if they're worrying about something, is will it change anything? Will it change the outcome? It's like we were saying about the old monkey brain, the caveman brain. If you have to think about something to preparing is different to worrying. So prepare. Do what you've got to do to prepare yourself. But if you're worrying about something you can't change, it's a waste of time and a waste of energy. If you're worried about something you can change, stop worrying and do something about it.
Yeah.
But if you can't,
Funnel the worry.
let it go. Yeah. There's useful worry and not useful worry, and most worry isn't useful. Like I say, I think there's a difference between preparing and worrying. So we all worry too much.
We do indeed.
And now we've said the word too much as well.
Yeah. And I'm going to say it again, just for the point. I think worrying and news go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
I think news outlets feed on the fact that within sort of panic and distress, there is entertainment in many respects. And I think people forget the news is an entertainment source. It's for the intensive purpose of providing you with food for thought. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
And
They want you to keep reading.
yeah, exactly. You go, oh, this is tasty. Let me get into this. Wow, how tragic.
Yeah.
That, how much interest is there in wondering what Trump has fucked up today versus the old man who crosses the street and has been helped along by two people. No one cares about that because it just doesn't. Within worry, there is sort of hypothesis and what if. There isn't that in good. In good, it's a happy ending, and there's no sort of through point. I think it's really important, and something that I've been shouting from the rooftops recently is about knowing of the availability bias. Do you know about the availability bias?
Tell me.
So essentially, it's what you see is all there is when it comes to your mind. So, for instance, I am someone who is opinionated, let's say, on psychedelics and whether they should or shouldn't be illegal. And my perspective on this is very different to someone who reads the news because we're coming from this from different angles. What I see is the therapeutic values that can come of this, of the personal benefits that can come from this. And then, don't get me wrong, that is tempered with knowing that these things can be inherently dangerous. I won't ever confuse that at all. But if someone just looks at the news and that's all that's available to them, all they'll see is tragic incident of child dying as a result of taking MDMA. And they'll go, right, that's terrible. Nothing good can come from that. And it's like, if that's all you see, then that's all you understand is there.
Yeah.
And with the news, you can't help but sort of really take that home and think, if all I see on the news is negative, then we must be living in a negative world.
Yeah, what a terrible world we live in.
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, the world has its wicked nature. It obviously does. But there's fruit and joy here as well. And there's so much of it. I think I
We see what we want to see as well. Go look for the good news because you will find it.
yeah, there's loads of it.
You know, yeah,
There is loads of it,
yeah.
and
Just
it's
what you
what
look
you
for.
choose to look at.
Yeah, I have this conversation with my mum quite a lot because my mum is worst case scenario, always, and it's always, well, I've heard loads of bad things about this thing, and I'm like, what about the good things? Look for the good things. They will be there. But you do find, and of course, thinking about technology and social media, the algorithms learn what you look at. So they'll give you more of what you look at.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how you end up in a loop, and that's how you end up not open-minded to a different point of view, because all you're seeing is the stuff that you already believed in, and then the technology learns that really quickly.
And it will just
It's quite
keep
scary.
on ingraining it.
Oh, yes.
I think one of the most valuable skills that we can cultivate when it comes to social media and at large our lives is to cross-reference. I think if you can look and you can go, right, this is telling me that, but
Yeah.
what's actually going on here? On the point of drugs, if I see a report of someone dying from using something, what's actually happened there? Let me look at it. Let me cross-reference
Yeah.
that
What
with
else has happened?
the fatality rates at large. You know, for instance,
Yeah.
the point of the MDMA that I said there, I saw something come up on the news of 60 people have died as a result of taking ecstasy over the last 2 years. Now, don't get me wrong, that is tragic. 60 people have died. That's awful, and it's sad. But then you look at that and you go, there are more deaths as a result of horse riding per year than there are in
Yeah.
2 years there, or people crossing the street, or
Yeah.
you know, there's so many things that are. I mean, don't even let me get started on the alcohol and the nicotine side of things. You know,
Oh,
there's so many things that are way, way more dangerous than that.
Yeah.
Don't talk about that because it sells more. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really important thing. Is the news is entertainment and it's supposed to sell.
Yeah.
And it's
absolutely.
narratives. It's feeding narratives.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. We should be open-minded. I mean, the whole COVID thing really brought people down on both sides, didn't it? And you had to be open-minded. There was all the conspiracy theories. Where did COVID come from? Should we be in lockdown? Should we not be? Is COVID even real? There was so much debate around that topic. And I've always tried to be open-minded to every side, but not enough people are, unfortunately.
The glamorized cold that brought the world to its knees.
Yeah, yeah.
What's your
People
opinion?
are talking about it a lot.
Because I've never actually sort of looked into. You know, I've heard the murmurs. I've heard this sort of the conspiracies and such, but I've never really paid a great deal of attention to COVID. What I have noticed, and what has begun to become more and more interesting to me, is how our world today has been influenced by that time. I think it's been tremendously influenced.
Oh, massively, massively. I mean, my job for a start, I probably wouldn't be in it because my organisation I work for are based in London, and now everyone works remotely. There is an office. We go in once a month for meetings, but now we have people working all over the country, and that wasn't the case before COVID. And I think being flexible to the way the world changes is important. But yeah, it's crazy how one thing like that can make such a big change.
For a lot of people, one of the most salient negative points of COVID has been that sort of lack of connection that has continued to be at the centre of existence for a lot of people. This sort of inability to sort of integrate in many respects.
Yeah.
How have you
Yeah.
found that your three fortes have been sort of useful for subverting that? Because I think a lot of the time, similar to this sort of feeding the narrative point, a really good example of this came. I went up to London last week and did something called Sanctum, which is like this yoga hippie dance.
Oh, cool.
And it was quite cool. And me and my brother had a conversation afterwards, and we said it's funny that we sort of make this point of how disconnected the world is, but then you come here and that's not the case. And I think the point that I'm sort of making there is, if you put yourself in the right room, you don't have that narrative anymore. If you put yourself in the place where everyone's laughing, it must be much harder to look and go, wow, what a miserable world as all these people are chuckling.
Absolutely. We need to surround ourselves with the right people. And humans as well. need connection.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
know, it's human nature. We need to be with other humans. And I think that was something that was really difficult in lockdown. There was a lot of loneliness, but then there was a lot of anxiety about, you know, we are so adaptable that after a lockdown, there was a lot of anxiety about coming out of lockdown
Yeah.
and being around people again. And it's had a massive effect. It's had a big effect, I think, on the coaching industry with there's so much more anxiety now than there was before. So much more kind of social anxiety. I think for the music industry, it was disastrous. Obviously, no live music. But for my band, it wasn't disastrous because we put an album together in lockdown because we couldn't do gigs. So again, it comes back to that, the good from the bad. We were gigging quite a lot just before lockdown happened. We may not have stopped to put an album together if we were still just focusing on gigging and being out there playing live music. So, it was good from bad. I'm glad I wasn't doing comedy back then, because the one thing I don't think I would ever want to do would be virtual comedy. The idea of not hearing the feedback. I've watched videos of like comedians just in their sheds telling jokes to a computer screen, and I'm like, I don't fancy that. I would not. I need the feedback. I need to hear that people are laughing. Otherwise, I just feel like an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, it's the spurring on, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need that.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't fancy that. So yeah, we need the connection for sure.
And I think as well, an interesting point that we just sort of called back to there is we get comfortable where we are. The mind is fantastic, as you say, easy for me to
Adapting.
say. Adapting. No, we can't help. I mean, you see it whenever anything catastrophic happens, is people get used to it. They just, it is now the way of the world. It is the way that we are. And you look at it.
About the new normal.
When you see awful things happen, you think, how are these people in Ukraine just sort of living their lives? And it's like, well, because what else do they do? You do adapt, and it becomes normal. And I think that's something to be really aware of, and I think is helpful to be aware of, is
absolutely
this sort of idea.
We can adapt to anything.
Yeah, and we can, and that can be used well. And I think this is something that I've sort of been playing with recently, is you don't know how good you will feel for doing something until you do it.
Yeah,
I've noticed a few times recently that I've sort of been scared of. The most recent example of this was I was due to be going for a run with a few people on a Saturday, and the night before I didn't sleep well. I wasn't feeling particularly well, and I was just tired. And I woke up on the day and I thought, I think I'm going to skip this. I really can't be bothered. And I didn't. I went, and once I'd gone, I realised, this is why I do this, because I like it.
Yeah.
But you're sort of crowded beforehand.
I'm the same with running, actually.
Yeah, but you don't realise. Well. Once you go, this is why I do this, because I like it.
I never want to run before I run.
Yeah.
And something someone else said to me is, you never regret a run. And it's so true. I never have. I've never regretted a run. But so often I've been like, no, I don't want to. And it's true for a lot of things, I think. A lot of things that we think, oh, can I be bothered? It's like that old saying, if you regret the things you don't do more than the things you do. It's so true.
Yes, absolutely.
It's so true in so many ways. And the other thing I was going to say on the fact that we can adapt to anything is so many people will say to me, like, I don't understand how you live without being able to see. Like, how do you walk out the front door? And I'm like, this is my normal. I've never known any different. And that's what kind of blows people's minds. Is I'm like, for me, it's not difficult because this is the only thing I've ever known. It'd be like me saying to people who can see that, oh, how do you survive without being able to fly? And you're like, well, I've never been able to fly. It's the same sort of thing. That is, we all have our normal, and we can do pretty much anything we want to do if we adapt to it. Like you say, people living in war zones, people do. I mean, you will, whatever shit life throws your way, you will survive because you have to. You've got no choice.
Exactly, and you don't have any choice. I think people forget that within an experience there is an inherent good that you will survive, because you will. You always do. Every single instance of adversity that if you have found yourself facing, you have got through, because you're here to tell the tale.
Exactly.
And I think that reframe of seeing that and noticing that, well, actually, that thing that was really hard, I did get through that. I did work it out.
Yeah.
I think
It
that
might have been shit. You survived.
yeah, but you just the human brain and our way of being is inherently geared to just work it out. We're
Yeah.
survivalists.
Yeah. We are. We've come this far. I think most people you meet have been through some kind of hardship.
You can't not. Life is inherently
No.
geared for that. You will experience tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's an interesting point, actually. You are probably the best person I could speak to on this point. I'd be interested to see what it is that sort of your take on this. This has been an idea that's been sort of percolating with me, and not necessarily for the better recently, is in being more mindful, I have been able to appreciate my surroundings more. So I've been more prepared to enjoy the fact that I've got all of my family, or enjoy the fact that I'm young, or be pleased with the fact that I'm currently out having a good time, for instance.
Yeah.
But there's sort of that residual, sort of inversed silver lining of I'm aware of the fact that this is so good that when it's not here, how bad will that be? I sort of think, wow, I've got my parents here. How wonderful is that? What about when
Yeah.
they're not here?
Yeah. I think that just goes back to the power of now.
Yeah,
Is that
that's a good point.
that's pointless, and we all have those thoughts, and it's, to me, it's what you put your energy into. So we can't control those thoughts that flit across our heads. Our thoughts are constantly moving. I like to think of them like clouds, and you get the storm clouds, but they will pass. And it is about, so you can't control those little thoughts that pop up, but you can control which ones you give the energy to. So our thoughts don't have energy until we focus on them. And so yeah, when you're thinking about all those good things, all the things you have, and a little naggy voice comes in and goes, well, what about the bad? You make that choice. And I'm not saying it's always easy, but I'm saying it's simple. And sometimes you have to work a bit harder to push those thoughts away and to focus on the ones you want to focus on. But it absolutely is within your control. And that it just has to be a decision you make as to what you focus on. And it's a really common struggle when everybody goes through it. It is about choosing which ones to put your energy into. And it's okay also to have the moments to think about the bad. We all have moods. We all have things that get us down. And it's also okay to recognise that. It's not always about pushing them away and being happy all the time, because that's not life. But it's about making that decision of which ones you want to give energy to in whichever moment, and to think, no, now isn't the time to think about the bad. I'll give myself time, but now isn't it. Now is the time to enjoy what I have right now.
Do you think people overcomplicate happiness?
Maybe. Yeah. It doesn't have to be complicated. But I think the key, for me, the key is that people don't realise it is a decision. But yeah, it's a simple decision. Like I say, I always say to people there's a difference between easy and simple. But it's not complicated. It might not be easy sometimes to make that decision. But yeah, it's a simple change. It's a simple decision.
How does that, that's a really interesting sort of reframe there. I really like that, sort of the difference between easy and simple. What's your inner narrative when it comes to sort of distinguishing that difference? How do you sort of talk to yourself about that?
Because to me, if I say something like I just said, like we can choose which thoughts we give our energy to, right? That's a simple concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no steps involved. But it takes effort sometimes. If we're feeling in a negative sort of headspace and we've already started giving energy to those bad thoughts, choosing a different path, choosing to focus on something else, having to muster up a different thought to try and cheer yourself up, to pull yourself out of it, it's not always easy. It takes effort, it takes energy, but it is simple. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's the difference? Yeah. And it just, sometimes it takes work. Like pulling yourself out of bed and going for an early morning run. That is simple. It's not easy, and I often fail at it. But it is quite simple. And, reminding yourself that I will be so glad I did this. Simple, but sometimes takes a bit of effort.
What are a handful of things that are sort of bankers of if I do this, I will feel better?
I think things like seeing friends, sometimes just getting out of the house. It depends what you find difficult, and it depends what refreshes you. I know I only started running, when did I start running? 21, I think, coming out of the kind of main 2020 lockdown. Lots of people started running. And I found running so hard. I found it so hard. I did the old couch to 5K. You only run for 60 seconds and then you walk and you build it up and build it up. But God, you feel good after it. I think exercise is a really good example. It's good for us physically and mentally, but it's sometimes hard to start doing. And I think it's about finding what works for you. Some people hate running and find it really boring. Some people like weights. With exercise, there's so many different forms. It's about finding what you do actually feel good after. I think, exercise, and I think people. We need, like we were talking about, connection, people, music. Again, that's probably quite personal to me, but lots of people, again, music, you can choose to listen to sad music, or you can choose to listen to music with a beat that gets you up and moving. It's finding, but all these things are really individual and unique, and it's about finding things that you do feel good about, even if you have to make an effort to do them in the first place. Those things that you're like, yes, I know I can't be bothered now, but I will feel better for doing it.
You sort of cultivate that trust within yourself as a result of that trial and error of going, absolutely, I know this is par for the course. I know that when I wake up, I can't be bothered to do it, but I just know this is part of it. I know that once it's done, I'll feel good. And I think that's where this value of sort of knowing that you've got time, you can take your time to learn yourself, and you'll realise what works. I notice now more than ever, I'm pretty good at calibrating. I know what does and doesn't work for me. And particularly on the other side of this as well, of where you go, I'm not feeling good today, let me reach for the jam donuts. No, put the fucking jam donuts in the bin. They never help. They don't work. Yeah. And and you sort of learn. And I think calling back to what it was that you said of sort of becoming aware of yourself on this, you know who you are and you can do it. Yep. And that sort of inner voice that goes, I know what I'm doing here. Just eat jam donuts, go for the run. And
you're doing well for that at 20, I have to say.
Thank you. I'm always on the mark on it, but I certainly try.
Yeah, self-awareness is so important. It's half the battle, though, self-awareness. How do you know what works for you if you don't pay attention? You have to look inwards.
I think
self-awareness is half the battle.
Looking at that.
But not spend too much time on it.
The power of now.
Yeah, exactly.
I can totally attest, actually, and this is something that I think there are some really simple sort of techniques or aphorisms, I don't know, are sort of just ways of being that I think really people overcomplicate. And I think music is one of them. I think if you cut out, I haven't listened to a sad song for a very, very long time. And that is directly in tune, ironically, with how my mood has been. Don't get me wrong, since the time I stopped listening to sad music, I've obviously had my sad times, but they're not exacerbated by music. And music definitely does that. I think music has a tremendous power to either push you further into the hole or lift you out of it.
Absolutely.
I can attest to if I stick Rihanna on and go for a run, I'm going to feel much better than if I sit in my room listening to XXXTentacion. I know that will happen. Music is a great power, I have to say.
It is, massively. It's in my life constantly. I don't go anywhere without it.
It speaks to our depths, and I love that. I used to write music myself, and for I mean, that sort of, it petered out as I got more and more into it, because I realised the passion wasn't in making the music, it was sort of in being with the music in some respects. I took it to the degree where it was no longer passion, it was work, and I realised I didn't want to work on it, I wanted to enjoy it. And now I love music, and I think music is something that if you can sort of understand yourself and your music tastes, I think a really useful piece of advice for people is to just don't listen to sad music. It has no value at all. It will only make you feel worse about what you're feeling, and it's very easy.
It won't pull you out.
Yeah, back to that point of comfort. It makes you feel understood.
Yeah.
That's an important point with music, and this is something that I did, was I looked for songs that made me, I could find a song that could explain the way I felt better than I could.
Absolutely.
And in doing that, you attach to it because it makes you feel understood. One of the hardest things of being sad is you feel unseen. You don't feel like you can sort of speak to anyone. And if a song comes along and gives you that, I know what you're saying. Here you go. I know what you're saying.
And that can be a good thing. That's okay. That's okay to have, as long as you don't stay in it.
In moderation, I think.
Yeah. It's like you say, that's a beautiful thing, is you can find a song about any situation you've ever been in your life. And that's cool. I like that to a certain extent. And it's kind of like, yeah, someone else has written a song about this, so someone else has felt the way I feel. And that can be good, but it can also pull you into that hole. I actually went to a gig about 3 weeks ago that did just that, and I didn't realise quite how much it would do that. And she's a kind of ADHD queer woman who's written a lot of music about loss and a lot of music about being a depressed teenager who drinks too much. And I heard myself in a lot of that music. And I took a couple of days to recover from that gig because it actually put me in, I really liked the music, but it put me back into that negative space. So it's, it can be good to find things you relate to, but like I say, in moderation, pull yourself out of it.
I think there's a time and a place for it in many respects. I noticed that there was a point in my life where, in a sort of twisted sense, I needed to be sad at that time to be able to be happy.
Yeah.
I sort of had to be.
Yeah, we have to do that. We have to go through that. You know, I went through my period of grief. I knew that I was allowing myself to go through it. I knew I could try harder to pull myself out of it, but I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel it to be able to move through it. And recognising that that is a decision, it's a good thing, but it's not about denying it all the time. Like I say, it's not about being happy all the time. You got to do what you got to do. You got to go through what you've got to go through, and as we've said, you always learn from it.
And as is the sentiment of this conversation, the power is in your hands. You are the author of your future, and there is the silver lining.
Absolutely.
I think that is a wonderful place to end what has been a wonderful conversation. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you about this. I knew this was going to be interesting, and I knew that you were going to come with some supreme advice, but I didn't know. It was very pleasant at the start of this when you said that you were a life coach, because I thought this is going to be even better than what I thought it was.
I hope it hasn't disappointed.
It hasn't at all disappointed. It has lived up to expectations and much, much
fantastic.
Further.
Thanks for having me on. This has been great.
You're more than welcome. As I say, I'm going to conclude the recording now with smiles and comedic laughter, so to speak. Right. People, see you later. Recording's ending.